Suddenly, this little bitty green hand holding a ketchup bottle came into view. And I freaked, because the guy sitting next to me was a Martian.
I think one of the interesting things to mention about you is the fact that you were the person that Steven Spielberg modeled a character of a UFO researcher on in his classic movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind.
I think he was intrigued with the idea of a French scientist running around the United States investigating the UFO phenomenon.
You've been looking at this phenomenon for a long time. You've worked closely with Dr. Alan Hynek and other UFO researchers. You've written many authoritative books, and yet your perspective on the UFO issue seems rather unique in the sense that you don't seem to be jumping on the extraterrestrial visitors bandwagon.
That's what was the main point of disagreement with Steven Spielberg. When I met Steven Spielberg, he was about halfway through filming Close Encounters, and we had a long discussion about what UFOs could be. And of course, for him, the main point of the movie was entertainment, and it was appropriate for the UFOs to be extraterrestrial visitors. I think that from my own point of view, I'm going to be very disappointed if UFOs turn out to be nothing more than visitors from another planet, because I think they could be something much more interesting.
Something from another dimension of space or time.
I think by this time, most people would agree that UFOs exist, or UAPs, whatever you want to call them. The purpose of this video is not to try to convince you of their actuality. The purpose of this video is to explore what they want, why they occur, why they're here. And pursuant to that, I'm going to look specifically at the teachings of a guy named Jacques Vallée, a very respected man in the scientific community, if you want to call it that. He helped invent the internet, and he did a lot of things beyond his research into UFOs. And if you want to know, just look him up. I also did a video about him and a few other guys a while back. If you want to go back and watch that, it explores the same basic themes of this work, but in a little more detail. But Vallée, he concluded that they're not from outer space. And, well, I'll just go through here and you'll see what I mean. Jacques Vallée, in Messengers of Deception and his broader work, strongly leans toward the idea that the UFO phenomenon may involve interdimensional or non-human intelligence rather than purely extraterrestrial beings from distant planets. He doesn't explicitly commit to one explanation, but proposes the interdimensional hypothesis as a more plausible framework than the extraterrestrial one. Here's a concise breakdown of his stance. Vallée suggests UFOs might originate from a reality beyond our three-dimensional space-time, possibly involving entities or forces that interact with human consciousness in ways that defy conventional physics. In Messengers of Deception, he argues that these phenomenon adapt to cultural expectations appearing as spacecraft, angels, or mythological beings depending on the era, which aligns with the interdimensional rather than extraterrestrial origin. In other words, they're adapting themselves to represent what we want them to be. And later we'll see pretty clearly what they want and what they're doing here.
It's clear that the phenomenon could not fit nicely in the four-dimensional physics that we use every day. We started looking at models of parallel universes because we need to account for the fact that witnesses are describing objects that seem to come out of nowhere, seem to disappear on the spot, objects that change shapes in the same way that, for example, a a five-dimensional object would go through our four-dimensional universe. That there are multiple universes never came from me. It's an idea that is very popular in physics today. It's a theory.
Now let's take a look at the man's reasoning pertaining to why he doesn't believe that they're extraterrestrial. And we'll go over them here. The volume of sightings. He's extrapolated based on the number of sightings that he's seen or that he studied, that there are probably about 3 million taking place in the world. And the behavior of the so-called occupants. All are humanoid and can breathe our air and withstand our gravity. Does that make any sense, that they could breathe our air? You know, and our gravity would be tolerable to them. But he goes even further than that. They walk through walls. How can a physical being walk through a solid object? They fly. That could be technological, but still, it doesn't make any sense. And then you have the actual physics of the craft themselves. They have positive lift, in other words, no gravity. They have sudden, instantaneous acceleration, which would undoubtedly kill anyone who's in the vehicle. Hypersonic velocity without any signatures. Transmedium travel, they go through, they go into the earth, they go into the water. It doesn't make any sense. And then they have low observability or cloaking ability. Now, granted, a lot of those probably could be duplicated with technology. However, when taken as a whole, it kind of makes you doubt whether or not they're actually a physical craft in the way that we would understand it. Also, think about it. They are all humanoid, and I've got some pictures here that's aligned with a lot of the reports people have made. They're all humanoid. They all have 2 arms and 2 legs and a head. Now, if life is going to evolve on another planet, would they evolve to basically look like us? Think about that. Think about the overwhelming odds against that. Why wouldn't they be, blob people or fish people or spider people or, crusty booger people? Who knows? But what are the odds that they would look like us?
But then also, too, we had pretty sure people from the agency that were there as well. And so you really don't find that. I've worked at Hurlburt Field. I worked in the military for a number of years. And so why would a intelligence agency need to be there on a meeting for whistleblowers? So that happened. I can tell you, based on my investigations, not in a classified setting, that I absolutely believe that there is things that are advanced technologies not of human origin. And then we conducted the interview with David Grush. As you saw, it was one of the most widely attended congressional hearings in U.S. history. The information that was brought forward was particularly alarming because you're hearing about people that have potentially been murdered and covering up this information, and it was very interesting. So I advise everyone to watch it.
Yeah, was it, so based off of what, and have you received classified information or just what they said?
No, yeah, we've, but I can't talk about that.
Of course you can't talk about it. So what did you, before you came to Congress, did you think aliens were real?
So I wouldn't call them aliens. I really like what Grush calls them. He says that they're interdimensional beings, and he's very specific about that.
So what does that mean?
With that being said, you have mentioned that there's interdimensional potential. Could you expound on that?
In terms of multidimensionality, that kind of thing, if you want to imagine a 3D object such as yourself casting a shadow onto a 2D surface, that's the holographic principle. So you can be projected, quasi-projected from higher dimensional space to lower dimensional. It's a
now let's get down to the meat and potatoes here, the purpose of the video. What is their purpose? Let's get to the nut cutting of the whole thing. This is what the man says. It doesn't matter anymore whether flying saucers are real or not. It still matters to me, that's him talking, of course, as an individual scientist. I have often stated, and I still believe today, that UFOs are real and technological. When I say that, it doesn't matter whether they are real or not. I am speaking of their social impact. I always say when I'm looking at conspiracies and doing conspiracy videos, people would say, why did this guy want to do this, or why do they want to do that? Look at the result. The result will tell you the motive. You can find scholars who will prove to you that supernatural powers of Jesus Christ never existed. You can also find scholars who will prove to you that they did exist. Does it matter? Of course not. It only matters to the experts who have a stake in their academic reputation for either side of the argument. The effects of the belief in Jesus, the impact of the doctrine based on the story of his life and death, are real enough. Socially, historically, the consequences are beyond question. And this is him speaking here. I claim that the same now applies to flying saucers because enough people believe in them, enough people believe that contact with them is possible, and enough people believe that they have secretly achieved such contact. It is too late for science. The social, historical, and political consequences of the spreading belief in the contact with space are here, and they are real, no matter how ludicrous or bizarre they may appear. And as I said just a second ago, if you want to discover the purpose, look to the effect. If you want to determine the cause, just look to the effect, and that'll give you the reason for the cause.
And also, they're just aspects, call them like psychic aspects of the phenomena that just seem to transcend nuts and bolts visitors from outer space. To me, an interdimensional provenance makes a lot of sense because now it answers the two biggest questions for me. How do they know about us? Because they're our dimension adjacent, to use LA real estate terminology. And maybe they are us in some way. Time distanced, the next dimension, alternate universe. So that goes a long way for me. Then you mentioned how they blink in and out. Well, if you have a craft that can go from one dimension to another, that seems consistent with that sort of paradigm. So
now here's where Mr. Valle starts to actually describe why they're here and what they want. It aims at social and political goals by diverting attention from some human problems and by providing a potential release for tensions caused by others. The contactees are a part of that machinery. They are helping to create a new form of belief and expectation of actual contact among large parts of the public. In turn, this expectation makes millions of people hope for the imminent realization of that age-old dream, salvation from above, surrender to the greater power of some wise navigators of the cosmos. And this is him speaking. I propose that the UFO we see is, among other things, a device which creates a distortion of the witness's reality, that it does so for a purpose, which is to project images or fabricated scenes designed to change our belief systems, and that the technology we observe is only the incidental support for a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction. I believe there is a machinery of mass manipulation behind the UFO phenomenon. In other words, they're trying to manipulate our consciousness, our beliefs, our expectations of what the world has to offer. So, what is the actual societal impact they're trying to produce? Because they're trying to produce something. Well, here we go. Social impact number one, and there are 4 of them. The contactee propaganda undermines the image of human beings as masters of their own destiny. The belief in UFOs widens the gap between the public and scientific institutions. Irrational motivations based on faith are spreading hand in hand with the belief in extraterrestrial intervention. The widespread belief that human beings are incapable of solving their own problems and that extraterrestrial intervention is imperative to save us in spite of ourselves. The danger in such a philosophy is that it makes its believers dependent on outside forces and discourages personal responsibility. Why should we worry about the problems around us if the gods from outer space are about to solve them? What's that sound like to you? Kind of sounds like dispensational Christianity, or it just sounds like religion in general. Massa Jeebus gonna come save us. Okay, social impact number 2, racist philosophy. The pernicious suggestion that some of us on the earth are of extraterrestrial descent and therefore constitute a higher race. The dangers inherent in this belief should be obvious to anybody who hasn't forgotten the genocides of World War II, executed on the premise that some races were somehow purer or better than others. Contactee philosophies often include beliefs in higher races and in totalitarian systems that would eliminate democracy. And these beliefs are packaged by contactee gurus like George Adamski. Adamski, he's just like Moses or Muhammad. He'd go off behind some hill somewhere and then come back and say that the aliens have told him what they want. And we should all believe in what the aliens want for the human race. They receive channeled telegrams. You are the genetic kin of our space family. Keep the earth pure for our eventual return. And the belief system is distributed through the control system network, Army PSYOPs, aerospace contractors, cult communes, to foster a quasi-religious loyalty to the Space Brothers. Eugenic anxiety, let's don't pollute the cosmic seed. Justification for obeying a new technological priesthood that claims to have the real genome data. And of course, the danger of this is if you really think that some guy from outer space wants you to go out and slaughter your fellow man, you'll do it because you think that, it's for a higher good, which is what all genocidal assholes have done throughout history. But like I said, think about it. All these UFO cults, all this UFO philosophy follows the same pattern as Moses or Muhammad or what have you. It's always got a prophet, some holy man who goes off, behind a hill or up into a mountain, and he communes with, the deity, and then he comes back and tells everybody what God told him, and thereby creates a religion. And isn't that what we're seeing? I, for one, though, I am a racist. I think that people who have hangy down earlobes are better than people who have attached earlobes myself. It just seems so obvious. Okay, social impact number 3, technical impotence. The statement that the birth of civilization on this planet resulted not from the genius and ability of mankind, but from repeated assistance by higher beings. The belief expressed by the contactees reveals a tragic lack of trust on their part in human ability, technological or technical impotence. And then the next one, number 4, social utopia. Increased attention given to UFO activity promotes the concept of political unification of this planet. Fantastic economic theories, including the belief of one world economy, can be created overnight and that democracy should be abolished in favor of utopian systems, usually dictatorial in their outlook. And what does that sound like? It sounds like the World Economic Forum. It sounds like the globalist agenda that we're seeing now being pushed all over the human race. Now let's look at an example. Vorilian Rael. He started his own UFO cult that garnered quite a following, and it still does. He was also a race car driver. But anyway, this is what he taught. You must eliminate elections and votes that are completely ill-adapted to the current evolution of mankind. Men are the useful cells of a large body called humanity. A cell in the foot doesn't have to say whether or not it's the hand should pick up an object. The brain decides, and if the object is good, the cell in the foot will profit by it. And a world government and a new monetary system must be created. A single language will serve to unify the planet. Now, what does that sound like? Sounds like leftist politics, doesn't it? Sounds like the wokey dokies. Now, Mr. Valle, he said that he thought that these craft or these objects are real and intelligently controlled. He simply ascribed them to be the manifestation of an extra-dimensional race. But in other works, he's postulated that a lot of these UFO sightings could be human, too. Deceptions concocted by people. But think about it. Couldn't it be both? If I were an extra-dimensional race of people who were trying for some reason to effect a change in human society, would I just flitter and flirt out there in the sky, or would I contact people here on Earth and get them to cooperate with me in achieving my goals? So a lot of the people who are calling the shots on this at the very top might very well be in contact with these extra-dimensional creatures and doing their bidding. It's kind of like, remember the X-Files? There was a race of extra-dimensional creatures, or rather extraterrestrial creatures, who were going to come colonize the planet, and there was a shadowy clique of men who were cooperating them and thereby facilitating their enterprise. But either way, I think it's kind of obvious that someone is trying to create a new religion for the new age.
You're on the air. Hello.
Hello, Art.
Yes.
Hi. I don't have a whole lot of time.
Well, look, let's begin by finding out whether you're using this line properly or not.
Area 51.
Yeah, that's right. Were you an employee or are you now?
A former employee.
Former employee.
I was let go on a medical discharge about a week ago, and I've kind of been running across the country. Oh man, I don't know where to start. They're gonna they'll triangulate on this position really soon.
So you can't spend a lot of time on the phone. So give us something quick.
Okay. Okay, what we're thinking of as aliens are they're extra-dimensional beings that an earlier precursor of the space program made contact with. They are not what they claim to be. They have infiltrated a lot of aspects of the military establishment, particularly the Area 51.
Now, in 28 years of eating hamburgers, I ain't never run into no Martian. Not at 2:30 in the morning, and certainly not at a fine scarfing establishment like Eat. Well, he was sitting over there with a bunch of colored sticks on his plate, and I looked over at him and I said, "What you eating there, boy? Crayons?" And he said,
"Why, no, they're Martian cigarettes."